8,500 feet down, on the floor of the North Atlantic, the most advanced submarine ever built lies scattered across a mile of mud. She is not resting on the bottom, she is spread across it. The wreck is in 6 pieces. An oceanographer who saw it said the ship looked like it had been fed through a shredding machine. Years later, a man was sent by the United States Navy to map this wreck in secret. His name was Robert Ballard. The world knows him as the man who found the Titanic. But the Titanic was his cover story. This submarine was his real mission. The Navy let him hunt for the most famous shipwreck in history, on one condition. First, he had to find their lost nuclear submarines. And there is one more thing. The day after this submarine died, a rescue ship arrived above the wreck. Its crew lowered their instruments and listened, and they thought they heard the Thresher answering them. They sent a signal down into the dark. "Send 5 dashes," they asked, "so we know it is you." No 5 dashes ever came back, because every one of the 129 men aboard had already been dead for a day. This is the USS Thresher. It is the deadliest submarine disaster in American history, and the United States Navy kept the reason sealed for 57 years. It began with a single pipe joint. Hold on to that. It is the 9th of April, 1963, 3:45 in the morning, at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in Kittery, Maine. Deep inside the Thresher, engineers begin the long, careful process of waking a nuclear reactor. It takes 4 hours. By 7:30, she has full power. The lines are cast off. The Thresher slips out into the cold Atlantic. You have to understand what this ship was. In 1963, she was the future. She was the lead boat of a brand new class of nuclear attack submarine. She was the fastest and the quietest submarine in the world. She could dive deeper than any combat submarine before her. She carried sonar and weapons that could find and kill a Soviet submarine before it ever knew she was there. She was the most sophisticated machine the United States Navy had ever put to sea. And that was exactly the problem. She was so advanced and so complex that no one fully understood how many ways she could fail. On board this morning are 129 men. Most are her crew, but not all. Aboard her are 17 civilians, shipyard workers, and factory men who built her systems and came along to watch them work. Her commander is a man named John Wesley Harvey. He is 36 years old. Harvey is one of the finest submariners in the fleet. He served aboard the Nautilus when she became the first ship in history to reach the North Pole under the ice. He took command of the Thresher only 3 months ago. And here is a detail from the record that is hard to read now. Before this voyage, an officer who knew this ship well put a warning in writing. He said the most dangerous thing about the Thresher was the danger of seawater flooding in while she was deep. He was worried about the pipe joints. He was worried that the electrical panels were not protected from a leak. That warning was on paper, and it was about to come true, word for word. The Thresher is not sailing alone. Above her is a small surface ship called the Skylark. The Skylark is a submarine rescue ship. She carries divers and a rescue chamber on a cable. She is there for one reason. If something goes wrong down below, she is the help. The two ships talk to each other through the water, using an underwater telephone. It is a strange, garbled way to speak, voices crackling up through hundreds of feet of ocean. This is the Thresher's first deep dive since a long overhaul in the yard. Today, she is going all the way down to her test depth, 1,300 feet, the deepest she is designed to go. At that depth, the sea does not push on the hull, it crushes it. Every square inch of the Thresher is being squeezed by tons of water. At those depths, there is no room for error. There is no swimming to the surface. There is only the steel holding the ocean out. Early on the morning of the 10th of April, the Thresher begins her dive. She goes down slowly, in careful stages. At each depth she stops, and the crew checks the hull and reports to the Skylark that all is well. Down she goes. 400 feet, 600 feet, 800 feet. Everything is normal. The voices on the underwater telephone are calm. And then, somewhere deep in the engine room, one of those brazed pipe joints gives way. The sea comes in. At the depth the Thresher has reached, water does not leak. It cuts. It comes through a small opening like a blade. Under enormous pressure, a jet of ice-cold seawater strong enough to slice a man in half. And it sprays across the electrical panels, exactly as that warning had said it would. The salt water shorts the electronics. Alarms begin to sound. And then the reactor shuts itself down. This is a safety feature. When the reactor senses a problem, it scrams. It stops automatically to protect itself. But when the reactor stops, the propulsion stops. At the worst possible moment, at the bottom of her dive, the Thresher loses her engines. She has no power to drive herself upward. She is going nothing but down. There is one thing left to try. The Thresher can blow her ballast tanks, forcing high-pressure air into them to push the water out and make herself light enough to rise. The crew reaches for it. This is the emergency. This is the moment the system exists for. And it fails too. As the high-pressure air rushes through the pipes, moisture in that air freezes. Ice forms inside the pipes and chokes them shut. The very system meant to save the ship strangles itself with ice. The Thresher cannot power up. She cannot blow her tanks. She cannot rise. Up on the Skylark, a radio man is listening to the underwater telephone. At 9:17 in the morning, a garbled message crackles up out of the sea. The words are broken, but the crew makes out enough. Minor difficulties. Have positive up angle. Attempting to blow. The men on the Skylark do not yet understand what they are hearing. A minor difficulty on a submarine at test depth is not minor at all. Then comes a final message. It is almost nothing, just fragments, and a single number that sounds like 900. And then, through the underwater telephone, the men on the Skylark hear a sound. Later they would struggle to describe it. A noise like air rushing, and then a low, dull, terrible sound far below. It was the sound of the Thresher being crushed. Somewhere around 2,400 feet, hundreds of feet below what her hull could bear, the ocean won. The submarine imploded. It happened in a fraction of a second, faster than thought. For the 129 men aboard, there was no drowning, no waiting, no dark hours trapped on the bottom. There was one instant, and then there was nothing. The men on the Skylark kept calling, "Thresher, this is Skylark, come in." There was no answer, because there was no longer anyone to answer. By mid-afternoon, 15 Navy ships were racing to the search area. They were already too late, and had been from almost the first moment. The days that followed were a long, painful confirmation of the obvious, a rescue that had nothing left to rescue. And here is where that eerie detail from the very beginning fits in. A submarine called the Seawolf arrived above the site about a day later. Over several dives, her crew reported hearing faint pings and sounds from below. They wondered if it could be the Thresher, if somehow a piece of her was intact, if someone was alive down there. They broadcast into the dark. Send 5 dashes, and we will know it is you. But the experts are certain. The Thresher had imploded a day before the Seawolf ever arrived. There was no clanging on the hull, because there was no hull left to clang, and no hand left to strike it. Whatever the Seawolf heard, it was the ocean, not the crew. The dead do not send 5 dashes. On the 12th of April, President Kennedy ordered the nation's flags lowered to half-mast. Then the Navy convened a court of inquiry. For 2 months, it took testimony. It heard from 120 witnesses. It filled 1,700 pages. And it reached a conclusion. The most probable cause was a flooding casualty in the engine room. A pipe had failed, the water had come in, the reactor had scrammed, and the ship had been lost. But the full findings, the deep technical detail, the exact chain of failures, all of it was classified, locked away. For the families, that was where it stopped. They were told their men were gone. They were not told, in full, why. And they were not told for 57 years. Out of the disaster came something that saved thousands of lives. The Navy created a program called SubSafe, a brutal new standard of inspection and design for every submarine. Before the Thresher, the Navy had lost 16 submarines to accidents. Since SubSafe began, it has lost exactly one, the Scorpion, 5 years later. And the Scorpion was never SubSafe certified. For 60 years, no American submarine built to that standard has ever been lost to flooding. But the families still did not have the truth, and the silence bred suspicion. Finally, a retired officer named James Bryant, a man who had commanded 3 submarines of the Thresher's own class, went to war with the Navy in court. He sued under Freedom of Information law to force the files open. In 2020, a judge ordered 3,600 pages declassified. And even now, with all of it on the table, the experts do not fully agree. The Navy's account points to flooding. But other analysts, studying the acoustic recordings of the sinking, argue the first failure was electrical, not a leak at all, and that the ship may have been intact until the very moment she imploded. The daughter of the Thresher's chief radio man put it simply when the files were opened. After 57 years in the dark, she said, it was finally time for the families to know. 129 men went down off Cape Cod on a spring morning, aboard the most advanced submarine on Earth. Most of the world has never heard their names. An officer wrote down the exact danger that killed them before it killed them. A single pipe joint opened the sea. A safety system froze itself shut, and the truth sat in a locked file for most of a lifetime. If the warning was there in writing all along, why did it take 57 years to admit what it said?